And it's only been 2 weeks. Remember that old saying, meant as a curse, may you live in interesting times? These are really interesting times and really worrying times. I don't even know where to begin. I have this inner voice that whispers to me, pace yourself. We're only 2 weeks into this 4-year drama. Another voice shouts at me, don't wait, engage. It's a difficult time to be a religious leader. I always felt that the rabbinate is a calling, and that even in times of intense anxiety, especially in stressful times, it's the highest of privileges and an immense honor to help people, to comfort the afflicted, and to speak truth to power. And it is especially in trying times that religious leaders prove their worth. Since October 7th, I've shared with colleagues that despite the immense pain, to be in Jewish leadership in these historic and difficult times for our community is a high honor. It's precisely when people need us most, and when history itself beckons, that we can make the greatest contribution. Still, our country is so polarized, and the Jewish community is so divided, that whatever rabbis say will be immediately seen through the political lens of one's rose-colored glasses. Some will agree, some will disagree, and others will query, why are rabbis even talking about this at all? I know this and accept it patiently and lovingly. I share, especially with younger colleagues, that if you're not up to it, emotionally or intellectually, if you cannot afford or are unwilling to pay this price of admission, you might not be in the right vocation. Take, for example, the beautiful sermon delivered by Reverend Bud at the National Prayer Service the day after the inauguration in Washington, D.C. It prompted immediate and scathing rebuke and demands for an apology from the president, his family, staffers, and supporters. I read the sermon in its entirety several times. Reverend Bud preached that unity is the threshold requirement for people to live together in a free society. It is not conformity, she clarified. Rather, unity is a way of being with one another that encompasses and respects differences, that teaches us to hold multiple perspectives and life experiences as valid and worthy of respect, to genuinely care for one another, even when we disagree. Reverend Bud cautioned that the culture of contempt that has become normalized in our country threatens to destroy us. Why was this contentious? What was controversial about it? Apologize for what? The outrage proves her point. The culture of contempt has become so normalized in our country that we cannot even hear conventional religious truths if they seem to us outside the confines of our own political fortress. Reverend Bud laid out 3 foundations of unity. First, honoring the dignity of every human being. Second, honesty in private and public conversations. And third, humility. We all make mistakes and we do things that we regret. We all have our blind spots and biases, and thus, she said, we should avoid convincing ourselves that we're always absolutely right and someone else is absolutely wrong, because then we are just a few steps away from labeling ourselves as the good people versus the bad people. And towards the end of her remarks, Reverend Bud turned directly to the president. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy on the people in our country who are scared now. Why is this even inappropriate, let alone controversial? It is straight up religion, preached for thousands of years. And it comes from Judaism. We taught that to the world. Hagid lecha Adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mimcha. It has been told to you what is good and what God requires of you, preached Micah. Only this: do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Some Talmudic rabbis considered this verse to contain the entire Torah, the essence of Judaism. Do these three things, they taught, and you have fulfilled God's demands. All the rest of Judaism is commentary, an explanation and manifestation of these three principles: do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Of course, we can and should debate at length the political application of religious values and their translation into policies. This is much harder. You can even argue that religion is bunk. Who cares about justice, mercy, and humility? You can follow some kind of Nietzschean philosophy of Superman who transcends traditional religious morality that was invented for the sole purpose of restraining the Superman, restraining me from realizing my aspiration to be an Ubermensch, dominating lower human beings. That's my rightful place. You can claim this whole religion thing is bunk to restrain me from being this kind of Superman. But do not claim to be religious or care about or even pay lip service to religious values and then demand an apology when a religious leader reminds you that justice, righteousness, and humility and mercy are at the very core of religion's vision, and that unity, dignity, and honesty in both private and public discourse are God's demands. Our synagogue is not partisan. You can be partisan. We cannot. We do not endorse or fund political parties or candidates. We do, however, care deeply about policies. Policies represent the collective morality of the American people. And our tradition insists that we are obligated to speak out upon such matters. Here at the dawn of a new American era, I want to lay out three Jewish principles that our synagogue is unalterably committed to and will uphold loudly and proudly when they are challenged. 1, we are committed to the protection and advancement of American democracy. Democracies are good for the world, good for their people, and very good for the Jews. We rarely think of the fragility of democracy. We tend to assume that America is indestructible. It's not true. Chip away at the pillars, and slowly but ineluctably, even before you realize it, you will unleash a tsunami of anger and discontent that will sweep everything away. It will spare no one. You cannot protect yourself by running to the top floor of democracy's citadel. By the time the monster wave retreats, it will have consumed everything in its path. Jewish lore describes the last two Jews in a small village. They hated each other and bickered constantly. Eventually, one of the two died. And when the survivor was asked how it felt to be the last Jew in the village, he responded, "Finally, I can run the community as I want." We must be careful of those who want to run the community as they and they alone want, who tell us with certainty that they have discovered the answer to everything. There's something fearful about them. They simmer with the flames of hubris and boil with the heat of certainty that liquefies reason. Even the most brilliant of us see the world only in fragments. People prone to all-inclusive theories are not usually in search of truth. They are in search of themselves. The liberal task is to expand freedom, and democracy is the best form of government to protect and expand liberty. For this reason, Judaism warns us not to vest too much power in one centralized authority. The biblical tower of conformity came crashing down. God scattered the people of Babel, instilling different languages and different customs. It's a cautionary tale. God does not want uniformity or blind loyalty in human affairs. God wants a cacophony of voices, Babel. God wants diversity. We need to hear other voices, people who challenge our assumptions and conceptions. We need to spread authority and power. It is the nature and purpose of the democratic system. Build a tower of oppressive uniformity that purges all contrary thought and influence and considers every disagreement to be disloyalty, and freedom will eventually collapse. We've seen it before. We've lived it before. In the horrors of ideologies that they were convinced that they and they alone discovered the one solution to all the world's problems. One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. We will never rid the human heart of prejudice, aggression, the will to dominate and exploit, ego, selfishness, conceit. They are as human as love, compassion, generosity, and kindness. Somewhere inside all of us is the instinct to dominate and the urge for power. Therefore, we must take great care to protect this fragile system of checking, balancing, distributing, and separating power. It is the system our framers created in their great genius. They knew human nature well. They knew that only strong institutions of democracy would protect us from ourselves, and that without adherence to democratic norms, our lives would become solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. 2, we are committed to the protection and advancement of human decency. Of course, on an individual level, we will continue to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and lift up the fallen. We are discussing expanding our Chesed program since the city closed our men's shelter and refuses to allow us to reopen. We will announce soon a series of new initiatives that represent the Jewish values of loving kindness and the expansion of human decency. But we must also participate in the national debate over policies. What religion worth its weight in salt only cares about a hungry person who shows up on our doorstep, but cares nothing for the policies that cause hunger or policies that can alleviate poverty? What kind of religion mourns the murder of school children, offers thoughts and prayers to the victims, but cares not a whit about policies that might prevent the next school shooting? It's very hard for countries to implement moral policies because countries have national interests. Individuals behave differently than groups. Most of us would never dream of seizing a sobbing child from her distraught mother, no matter our views of immigration. Even some immigration hardliners would not inform ICE on their own undocumented nannies. Self-interest plays a role. But it's not only that. That caregiver is a real human being. You know her. Innate human empathy animates your relationships, shaped and honed by the moral code you learned over time. Feelings of compassion and mercy flow through you. 2,000 years ago, Jewish sages pronounced the foundation of morality. All moral philosophy since is either an explanation or a variation on this theme. What is hateful to you, do not do unto others. An even stronger articulation of the biblical command to love your neighbor as yourself. The sages assert that morality is best understood through personal relationships. We are most aware of our moral obligations when we experience moral offense ourselves. How does it feel to me? Gives rise to an understanding of my obligation to you. If the behavior is hateful to me, it is not right to perpetrate it on you. Countries do not act this way. Nations have national interests. The state views misery differently. The collective looks into the eyes of a refugee and sees not what you see. The nation sees security, legality, demography, economy, rightly so. No nation can long exist if it does not concern itself with collective needs. A country that has lost control of its borders has lost control of its sovereignty. Thus, the political imperatives of the collective never fully align with the moral imperatives of the individual. Knowing that collectives think more about power and interest and less about morals and values, it is the job of every morally sensitive individual to help align national policy with moral probity to the extent possible. Year after year, generation after generation, century after century, we seek to tame the human animal, pacifying our destructive impulses and bending the collective's behavior more towards the long arc of justice. While the state has national interests and must be powerful to ensure human happiness, it must also be just. Otherwise, the internal contradictions will overwhelm us, weakening the nation itself. In free societies, moral cohesion is what makes us strong. Some of our greatest leaders understood this. Let us have faith that right makes might, said Abraham Lincoln. And in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it. Right makes might is our faith as well. In fact, Lincoln probably learned it from Judaism. He was an avid student of the Bible. The essence of the prophetic tradition is the dire warning of the Hebrew prophets that society cannot ignore justice and righteousness. It is not all about power, politics, preeminence, and profit. If the collective disregards conscience, sooner or later the nation itself will collapse. We will prey on each other like the beasts of the field. The Torah, the Hebrew prophets, and rabbinic tradition all assert that the very future of the nation depends on its moral vigor. 3, we are committed to the protection and advancement of the State of Israel and the American Jewish community. We do not want to take over Greenland or Panama or Canada or Gaza. And we do not want to be murdered, brutalized, raped, and kidnapped by Gazans. We seek coexistence. As long as the other side does not, there is no alternative but to protect ourselves. Israel is a Western democracy. Hamas is an anti-Western terrorist force. And the sad but incontrovertible truth is that Hamas is supported by the majority of Palestinians in both Gaza and the West Bank, who seek not coexistence with Israel, but the elimination of the Jewish state. And we will not accept eruptions of Jew hatred in the United States. We will not accept the cries, Jews go back to Poland, especially from people who have lived in our country for a fraction of the time that we have lived here. The hypocrisy, even betrayal, is maddening. For decades, Jews fought for liberal immigration policies in the United States. We urged the acceptance of refugees from Arab and Muslim lands, the embrace of those persecuted, oppressed, gassed, and brutalized by their own rulers, irrespective of their religious or political views. For decades, we advocated that. And now, some of those very people who came here as a result of liberal immigration policies turn against the Jewish community with cries, go back to Poland, resounding with exterminationist echoes. We will support efforts to tame anti-Semitism on American campuses and enforce the constitutional requirement of equal protection of Jews. We will speak out against anti-Zionists in all arenas, including Jewish ones. In this week's Torah portion, Beshalach, the Exodus from Egypt reaches its climax. There, by the shores of the sea, God finally destroyed Pharaoh's army. Egypt represented the taskmaster: injustice, cruelty, arrogance, and the first ever genocidal intentions against our people. They were so filled with feelings of superiority that it never dawned on Pharaoh, the charioteers and foot soldiers of Egypt, that the sea might close in on them. They just marched straight through. Such was their determination to reclaim their slaves. Even when they were drowning, They still pursued their slaves. Bertolt Brecht wrote a poem containing these words. And even in Atlantis of the legend, the night the sea rushed in, the drowning men still bellowed for their slaves. What is hateful to you, do not do unto others. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. All the rest is commentary.